Have you ever looked at your life? The patterns, the heartbreaks, the fears, and wondered, where did this even come from? Why does this feel bigger than me? But the older I got, the more I felt this strange weight in my bones. Like I was carrying ghostite. Never even met. I used to think my pain was mine alone. The consequences of my own choices. My own mistakes. I remember the moment I first realized that my wounds didn't start with me. It was a Sunday afternoon. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where she used to braid my hair before school. The smell of coffee drifted through the room, mingling with the quiet hum of an old radio. She was telling me a story I'd heard a dozen times about my grandfather, a man I'd never met, but whose shadow loomed over every generation after him. He didn't know how to love. He only knew how to control. She spoke in that detached way she always did when talking about him, like she was reading someone else's memories. He was a hard man, she said, staring into her cup. I traced the cracks in the ceiling with my eyes, just like I did as a kid when I couldn't sleep. I could see it then. The invisible line that ran from him to her, and from her to me. How his rage turned her into a girl who walked on eggshells, and how that same fear turned me into a woman who always apologized for existing. The moment the pattern snapped into place. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom. The same creaky bed, the same faded posters on the wall. Memories tumbled out like old photos from a dusty box. This isn't just my pain. This is survival written into my DNA. I saw my mother, standing in the kitchen, flinching when someone raised their voice. I saw myself, 5 years old, trying to make her laugh when I saw her crying. I saw my grandmother. In my mother's stories, a woman who learned to swallow her words, to never speak unless spoken to. The backyard was full of plastic chairs, cheap beer, laughter that never reached the eyes. Others, my age, already carrying the same bitterness I saw in the adults. The same anger, the same secrets nobody dared name. We laughed, but our eyes darted, always watching for the next explosion. It hit me like a wave I couldn't fight. How many times I promised myself I'd love better. Yell less, never repeat the same mistakes. I thought about how many times I'd said, I'll never be like them. But then I remembered the first time I screamed at someone I loved. The look on their face, the way my voice sounded like an echo of my mother's, my grandfather's, all the voices that came before me. Generations who couldn't say I love you without the words tasting foreign in their mouths. I realized then. You can't outrun what you refuse to face. Generational trauma is like a relay race. If you don't drop the baton, you pass it on. The family reunion that changed me. But anger at the lie that told us we had no choice but to keep repeating it. A few months later, I went to a family reunion. I watched my cousins, some so young, playing tag under the oak tree. I'd still flinch at conflict. I'd still fight my own shadows. I heard the jokes they made. The passive-aggressive digs, the gossip, the old rivalries, masked as family banter. It struck me how we were all so good at pretending we were fine. I would learn to love the parts of us we were taught to hide. It was the same fear, dressed up in polite smiles. The same old wounds, bleeding quietly under the picnic table. In that moment, I felt a surge of grief so big, it made my chest ache. I saw generations of people who never learned how to say, I'm sorry. People who didn't know how to hold each other without hurting. And then, just as quickly, that grief turned into something else. A quiet rage, not anger at them. The decision to break the cycle. That night, driving home alone under a sky full of stars, I whispered to myself, it ends with me. It wasn't a vow to be perfect, but it was a promise. I would not hand this pain, untouched and unexamined, to anyone who came after me. I would look my family's ghosts in the eye. I would name them. I would stop pretending we were fine. Because someone has to drop the baton. Someone has to say, enough. And if you're here, listening to this, maybe you're that someone too. In the next part, I'll take you deeper into the stories I uncovered about my family's pain, the secrets that shaped us, and how facing them was the beginning of my freedom. Stay with me, because when you look back with open eyes, you take your first step forward. If you would walk through my family's old house, you'd never guess how much pain the walls had learned to keep. From the outside, it looked normal. A small white house with flowers out front. The hum of a TV always drifting out the living room window. Stories that shaped every silence, every outburst, every look we gave each other when we thought nobody was watching. But inside, behind the laughter at Sunday dinners, the polite small talk at birthdays, there were stories nobody told. The afternoon sun made the air shimmer. I asked casually, like I wasn't terrified of the answer, Mom, What was Grandpa really like? But who felt like a ghost I was always bumping into? I remember one day, years ago, I asked my mother about my grandfather, the man I'd never met. I was 17, sitting on the porch while she watered her plants. I knew which topics would make my father's jaw tighten, which questions would make my mother's eyes glaze over like a window fogged with rain. She paused. I watched the hose water spill over her feet, soaking her slippers. She didn't look at me when she answered. The way her shoulders always tensed when someone raised their voice. The way she flinched when a door slammed, even decades later. The way we smiled for holiday photos while whole storms brewed inside us. We'd sit in the garage for hours, the smell of motor oil thick in the air. He put down his wrench, wiped his hands on an old rag, and said, almost to himself, "You know, your grandfather hit me once so hard I couldn't see straight for 2 days." He'd tell me stories about when he was my age, riding around with friends, blasting music, dreaming of leaving town and never looking back. He was strict, she said finally. He wanted things done his way. He didn't like weakness. They were the same eyes, I'd see in the mirror, years later. Eyes that knew how to smile while they bled inside. That was all she said. But in that silence, I heard everything she couldn't find the words for. The beatings nobody ever talked about. How my uncle learned to numb the pain with beer and late-night poker games. How my mother learned to numb hers by disappearing into her chores. The laugh that says, "It wasn't that bad. It's fine. I survived." How secrets shape us. I didn't drink away my feelings like my uncle. We were the kind of family that kept secrets like heirlooms passed down, hidden in plain sight. As a kid, I learned to read the room before I could read a book. Sometimes it changes costumes. Swapping fists for cold shoulders, shouting for silent treatments, rage for withdrawal. It was the little things too. Nobody ever said, "We don't talk about that." But the message was clear as day. It wasn't just the big things. The addictions, the infidelities, the quiet nights that ended in loud fights. The way we told half-truths to keep the peace. The way we said "I'm fine" when we were anything but. "I'm scared." I see it now, how we learned to love with strings attached. To apologize without saying the word, to hurt each other and call it normal. The story of my uncle one summer, when I was 20. I spent a week helping my uncle fix up his old truck. One evening, the sun was setting, and the light made everything look softer than it was. He laughed when he said it. That hollow laugh I'd come to recognize in so many people I loved. They didn't have the words for this, but I do. It was about seeing the truth and choosing to do something they never had the chance to do. But his eyes told the truth. That night, I lay awake in my old bedroom, thinking about all the things we never said out loud, and how I learned to numb mine by pretending I didn't need anyone. How the cycle sneaks in. We like to believe we're different, don't we? The moment you see the pattern is the moment you have the choice to change it. It means you honor the truth, so it doesn't have to own you anymore. That will do better. Love better. Be better. I told myself that too. I thought I'd broken the cycle, because I didn't yell like my grandfather. I didn't slam doors like my father, but then I noticed all the ways I carried it forward anyway. I carried it in my silence, in the way I shut down when people asked me to open up. I carried it in my people-pleasing, bending over backwards to keep the peace because conflict felt like poison in my veins. I carried it in my fear of intimacy, wanting closeness so badly, but panicking every time someone got too near the parts of me I was taught to hide. That's how generational trauma works. It doesn't always look the same, but the wound stays the same. It whispers. This is how we survive. Don't speak. The moment I decided to dig deeper, one winter, after a fight with someone I loved, I sat alone in my apartment, the hum of the heater, the only sound in the room. I'd said things I didn't mean. Words that came out like knives, because I didn't know how to say, "I'm hurt." It was like watching my grandfather's ghost speak through my mouth. I remember pulling out my old family albums. Yellowed pages, photos curling at the edges. I looked at faces I'd never met. My great-grandmother, eyes hollow from a life harder than I'll ever know. My grandfather as a young boy, standing next to a father who looked like stone. I traced my finger along the lines of their faces and realized they didn't know any better. It was the first time I felt compassion for them. And for myself, I understood that healing wasn't about blaming them forever. If you're here, you're brave enough, if any of this feels familiar. If you've ever felt like you're recarrying someone else's sadness, someone else's rage, someone else's shame. You are, but you're not powerless. Your awareness is your superpower. In the next part, I'll tell you how I took my first real steps to break the cycle. The raw conversations I had. The boundaries I set, the ways I learned to forgive without forgetting. Because breaking the cycle doesn't mean you pretend it never happened. Stay with me. You're not alone. People always say that breaking the cycle means you'll feel strong, powerful. But the truth is, the first time you stand up to the ghosts in your family, you feel like your voice will crack and shatter you from the inside out. I wish I could tell you I did it with grace. I didn't. I did it with my palms sweating and my chest tight. I did it trembling. But I did it, and that's what matters. The first conversation, it started with a simple question at my mother's kitchen table. I was home for the weekend. The smell of her cooking drifting through the house, that familiar mix of comfort and unease. We'd always been close in the way some families are close. Close enough to know each other's favorite foods, birthdays, small talk. But never close enough to say the things that really needed to be said. For a moment, I thought she'd deflect. Tell me to mind my own business, change the subject. But instead, her eyes glazed with a sadness I'd never seen her let me see before. We were sipping tea when I asked her, "Mom, do you ever wish things had been different between you and Grandpa? If I'd been allowed to say no, if I'd been allowed to be a child?" She looked at me like I'd cracked the ceiling open. But she reached across the table, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was holding her hand not as mother and child, but as two wounded children trying to grow up together. She said, "Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if I'd felt safe." I carry that fear too. The words hung in the air between us, like a fragile thread. And then, without warning, I felt my throat tighten. I sat in my car, shaking, wondering if I'd gone too far. Wondering if I'd just lost the little closeness I'd fought so hard to have. I told her, "I think I still carry that for you." She didn't say anything for a long time. The third time, I stood up, walked out, and didn't come back until he called to apologize. For my grandmother who never got the chance. For the child in me who thought staying quiet was love. Boundaries that hurt before they heal the second time. He said I was being disrespectful. Honestly, no. It felt awful at first. After that, things didn't magically change overnight. Loyalty means silence. The real work was what came next. Setting boundaries that my family had no blueprint for. I remember telling my father I wouldn't tolerate yelling anymore. The first time I said it, he laughed. Did it feel good? I told her about the therapy sessions, the boundaries, the conversations with my mother, the ways I was trying to peel back the layers of our family pain instead of pretending it never happened. But here's what nobody tells you about breaking the cycle. You feel like the villain to people who benefited from your silence. Holding a boundary isn't about punishing anyone. It's about protecting the parts of you that were never protected before. I realized that every time I said no more, I was not just speaking for myself. I was speaking for the version of my mother who couldn't say it. But I'm more scared of living the same lie forever. Others quietly started asking me how to do it too. How to talk about things they buried for decades. I just stayed, witnessed her pain instead of running from it. Confronting the family code. Don't air dirty laundry. Family secrets stay secrets. And choosing not to become a prisoner of it. There's this thing in families like mine. Loving myself enough to say, this ends with me. It goes like this. Don't talk about what hurts. The day I broke that code, I felt like I was betraying everyone. Where love doesn't come wrapped in fear. I was sitting at my cousin's wedding, surrounded by aunts and uncles, and second cousins, who all carried the same old stories in their bones. An older cousin leaned over and asked, "How are you really doing? You look different." I don't know what possessed me, but I told her the truth. But maybe, just maybe, by doing my own messy healing, I'm giving her permission to live lighter than we ever did. Where boundaries aren't punishments, but gifts. She looked at me like I'd spoken a forbidden language. One we'd all been born knowing but were told never to use. She said, "Aren't you scared? They'll hate you for talking about it." I smiled. My voice trembled when I said it. But I meant it. Yeah, how it changed me since then. Things have shifted. Not everything is perfect. It never will be. Some family members pulled away, saying, I was too sensitive. Breaking the cycle isn't always dramatic. Sometimes, it's the quiet choices that matter most. Like the day I told my younger cousin, "You don't have to forgive people who keep hurting you, just because they re-family." Or the night I sat with my mother, holding her hand while she cried for the first time since I was a child. And I didn't rush to fix it. The unexpected freedom, one of the biggest surprises, was realizing that forgiveness didn't mean pretending it never happened. Forgiveness, for me, meant seeing the whole story. My grandfather's rage, my mother's fear, my own silence, It meant letting myself grieve the family I wanted us to be while loving the family we are. Flawed, bruised, trying. It meant learning to love them from a distance when I had to. When the generations shift a few weeks ago, I watched my niece playing in my mother's backyard, barefoot in the grass, hair wild, laughter bubbling up like a song. I sat there and felt something I'd never felt before. Hope that she'll grow up in a family where I am sorry isn't a foreign language. I know I can't control everything that happens to her. If you're here, if you've ever wondered if it's worth it. If it's worth being the one who breaks the silence, who speaks the unspeakable, who says no more, I promise you it is. It doesn't make you the bad one. It makes you the brave one. In the final part, I'll share the practical ways I keep breaking the cycle every day. The simple rituals. The forgiveness that frees me, and how you can start rewriting your story too. Stay with me. You're not alone in this. If you'd told me years ago that breaking generational trauma would feel like gardening, I would have laughed in your face. I used to think healing was dramatic. Huge breakthroughs, big confrontations, family members weeping at the dinner table, hugging it out and living happily ever after. The truth is, it's much quieter than that. It's daily. It's waking up every day and choosing to do one small thing differently than the people who came before you. The morning I chose peace, I remember one morning that changed everything. Not because it was big, but because it was so small. So ordinary. I was in the kitchen making coffee, scrolling through my phone, when a message popped up from a family member. The words were sharp, a cheap shot meant to sting. The old me would have reacted instantly. A biting reply, a sarcastic comment. A phone call that turned into shouting and crying and hanging up mid. I took a deep breath and asked myself, is this the version of me I want to be? Or am I just replaying the script? Instead, I put my phone down. I made my coffee, sat by the window, and imagined my ancestors standing behind me. All of them. The angry ones, the bitter ones, the silent ones. I pictured myself turning around and saying, it stops here. I didn't reply to that message. I didn't play my old part in our family drama. I chose peace. And that choice, that one quiet moment, felt like breaking a chain that had been wrapped around my family for generations. What it means to forgive without forgetting people. Ask me if I've forgiven the ones who hurt me. My grandfather I never met. My father who shouted. My mother who sometimes couldn't protect me. The truth is, yes. But not in the way you think. It's okay, none of it mattered. Because it did matter. It shaped me. It means putting down the torch they handed me and saying, I won't burn everything down just because you did. It wrote scripts in my body that I still feel sometimes when someone raises their voice or slams a door too hard. I didn't sit down and say, forgiveness for me means looking at them as they were. Broken people doing the best they could with what they had. It means loving them at arm's length if I need to. Forgiveness means I'm free. It means I get to keep my love soft. It means I don't have to become what hurt me. I tell the truth, even if my voice shakes. The small rituals that keep me free. I ask what it's trying to protect. Sometimes I go for a walk, stomping my feet into the earth, reminding my body it's safe to feel. Breaking the cycle sounds big, but it lives in the tiniest moments. I remind myself, love doesn't mean self-abandonment. Here are the rituals that keep me anchored. I speak what was once unspeakable. When my friends ask how I'm doing, I don't say I'm fine if I'm not. I honor my feelings. When I feel anger, I don't swallow it down like poison. Every smile that isn't born of fear is a rebellion against the silence I was raised in. You're allowed to be loved. I set boundaries. You don't need a dramatic family confrontation to start. When old family patterns creep in, the guilt trips, the manipulation, I say no. I reparent myself. You heal them by saving yourself and showing them it's possible. When my inner child panics, whispering that I'm not enough, I place my hand on my chest and say, you're safe now. Maybe they'd see that the pain they carried wasn't in vain. I celebrate softness. Maybe you say, I'm sorry. When nobody before you ever did. She will grow up seeing me say, I'm sorry, I love you, that hurt me, I let myself play. Laugh loudly, dance in the kitchen. What I want you to know, if you see yourself in my story, I want you to know. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need permission. You just need a single moment. Today, where you do something different. Maybe you write a letter you'll never send. Maybe you speak a truth you've swallowed for decades. Each tiny act of courage is a crack in the armor of generational pain. Each boundary you hold is a bridge you're rebuilding for the next generation to cross into freedom. You don't heal your family by sacrificing yourself to save them. A new story for the ones who come after. Subscribe if you want to keep walking this path with me. Sometimes I wonder what my ancestors would think if they could see me now. Crying in therapy, hugging my inner child, telling people no without explaining myself. I think maybe they'd be proud. That all the hurt they couldn't name, the rage, the silence, the shame, is finally being spoken into the light. I think about my niece, running barefoot in the backyard. She'll know that love can be soft, that families can be safe, that wounds can heal. Your turn to break the cycle. If you've made it this far with me, through every ghost story, every whispered secret, every buried wound, I want you to know this. You are the cycle breaker. You are the dream your ancestors didn't dare to dream. You are the one who gets to stand up, turn around, and say, "It ends with me." So here's what I want you to do now. Your small act of courage. Leave a comment and tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Let that be your way of saying, I'm here. I'm awake. I'm doing this work. And if you feel called, share this story with someone you know is carrying a weight that isn't theirs. You are not too broken to heal. You are not alone in this work. You are the healing your family line has been waiting for. One breath, one boundary, one brave act at a time. This is how we break the cycle.